All right. We're going to start up here. This is one of the earliest paintings in the show, so we'll start here. I thank all y'all for being here. This gives me an opportunity to, I don't know, kind of an old ham. I love the opportunity to talk, so this is good. This painting was done in 1988. And there's a drawing here, a study that was done for it in 1987. I've been in New York maybe, I don't know, less than half a year when I made the drawing as a study for this painting. So it's the first painting I did, and this is what my impression of New York when I was first up there. It was like, wow, city. And it's from imagination, but it's imagine. I was living down several blocks below Canal Street, and so I was traveling up and down Broadway, up like the house. So it's kind of from my mind's eye what the street, the architecture, that lower stretch of Broadway looked like. So that was, as the years went by and I kind of settled into New York, it started looking maybe less extreme, but I saw some things that just blew my mind. Like this figure here, I've seen that man. He was like a half man. He'd lost his legs from about here, and he was a beggar, and he was going up and down Broadway on like a little platform with wheels. Skateboard. But it just like the humanity, just so many people. The whole art is about the human figure and people and people's stories. And all of a sudden, just to be immersed in that city with all those people, I was fascinated by it, just like sort of stunned by it. And so that's what that painting is. It's like what it felt like to me when I was first in the city. There's that drawing, and then everything in the show is paintings. I'm primarily a painter, but I do a lot of drawing. I've always done a lot of drawing being the basis, the artwork that I do, the paintings that I do, it's all based on drawing. So I thought, along with this show of paintings, that I put an example of several little drawings. That's what those are. Moving along here, we get this thing now. This is Tompkins Square Park in New York City, in the Alphabet City, the Lower East Side. This is where I lived. Well, I was up there for 26 years. 20 of those years was in this neighborhood right here. This is Tompkins Square. This is Avenue B back here, and that's the corner of Avenue B and 9th Street. And I lived around the corner right there on 9th Street. And I did a number of paintings set in the park. And the people that I knew in the park, this one here, this is a portrait of my friend Anthony. And Eleanor recognized that he's a Gemini, so as a means to paint his portrait, I portrayed him as his astrological sign, Gemini, the twin. That was good. That's the first time someone has picked up on that.
That's just because I'm a Gemini.
That's right. I was very impressed. So anyway, Anthony was, I met Anthony within 6 months when I was in the city, and remained friends with him the whole time I was there and afterwards. He visited me in Florence a couple of times. And if any of y'all remember the Clay Pot coffee shop in the block, if you were ever in the bathroom there was a mural painted around the wall. And it was Anthony who painted that. One of his trips here on the way back and forth. He was from Fort Worth, and he would travel back to visit with his aunt, who was it was his great aunt, and she raised him. And so he was kind of like her mom, and he would travel back and forth some to Fort Worth to visit with family. Now, the first job I had in the city, I was down in Tribeca, and when I was first there, I had maybe 6 months worth of money that I could like explore and sort of find out where I was in the city. I didn't have to worry about finding a job immediately. Pretty soon I did, of course, and it turned out that the studio where I was on the 4th floor of a loft space in Tribeca, on the street level, on the street door, there was a sign shop, Manhattan Signs and Designs, and as well as a picture painter and a muralist and all that. I'm a sign painter, old school sign painter by trade as well. Something I picked up when I was young, knowing that if I was going to make my living with paints and brushes and being an artist, I was going to have a source of income. So I learned sign painting trade that I could apply. And that was the first job I had in the city. I ran out of money and I went downstairs and went into the door of the sign shop and said, "Hey, y'all need a sign painter?" And they did, so very convenient. But Anthony was working in there as a sign painter also, so I met him. And another friend, we'll get to another painting back over here with another man, Ray Abeta, who worked in there as a sign painter. So these are friends that lasted throughout my entire time in New York. Got to be like artist friends of mine who, good buddies. Anthony came to me, he and Ray and I were in this warehouse painting a big sign banner. And Anthony came to me and he says, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm not going to worry about the money. I'm not going to worry about having to be anywhere. I'm not going to have to worry about my rent. I don't want anything to do with any of it. I'm going to move into the streets and just make my art. And I says, "Anthony, you're nuts." And he says, no, says, I'm not going to participate in the system. It's corrupt. It's evil. It's like it takes advantage of people. I don't want anything to do with it anymore. I just want to make my artwork. And so he moved into the street. And he was there for 30 years. Matter of fact, he had a very successful career as an artist, outside of artist. He's in publications. You can Google him. He'll come up. He's a very well-known, established outside artist that he did from the streets. He had a knapsack that he had. Everything he did generally was miniature. And and his backpack was his studio. And he would work at the tables at the New York City Library, or he would work under the bridge, or he would sleep in cardboard boxes on construction sites, but he would have to get up early and be gone so that they wouldn't mess with him, pick him up. There was one advantage to that. Anthony would hit the streets early in the morning, because if you're sleeping on the street, you want to be up and moving when the city gets moving. So Anthony would be up wandering in the city, and he would find things. It's amazing what is thrown out in New York and is on the street in the morning, and it's not there for very long. And Anthony would bring me things that he found that he thought I could use. And he brought me a pair of brand new cowboy boots that were my perfect size. $200 boots. I says, how did they end up on the sidewalk? I figured probably some girl, her boyfriend made her mad, and she threw his stuff out the window and it landed on the street, and Anthony found those boots and brought them to me. And I wore them for years. Now, Anthony he used my mailing address there on 9th Street to get his mail, because he was communicating with his aunt, and he would come by on Sundays and check his mail. And we had this ritual or tradition that was established. It went on for weeks and weeks and weeks. He'd come get his mail, and we'd go to the park, and I'd stop at the bodega on the corner, and I'd get us a cup of coffee to have our Sunday morning coffee. And Anthony would have a sack with cinnamon buns or sweet rolls or scones or something to go with the coffee. And I'd always say, where'd you get those, Anthony? Because there'd be times he and I'd be walking down the street, in New York, and there's a trash can on the corner, and there's a pizza box sitting there. And Anthony would say, "Oh, check it out." And he opened it up and said, "Man, there's 3 pieces of pizza. You want a piece of pizza?" I said, "No, thanks." But he said, "Oh, it's good." And Anthony would, so he had this city wired. He knew where everything he needed was. And, in the city, when places that sell food, they can prepare food, and you can sell it for a certain number of hours, and then no longer you can't sell it anymore. Like a deli on the corner can prepare sandwiches, and it's for sale for 24 hours or whatever that time frame is. Some people then would take that stuff that didn't sell and throw it in a trash can because they're hard-hearted. But then there's some people that have a good heart, and they would put it out on ledges, where people that need it would find it. And Anthony knew where all the good stuff was. So I'd say, "Anthony, where'd you get those scones?" And he said, "Man, these came from Balducci's, which is like the shishi deli in the city." I said, "Well, give me one of those scones." Well, we had this conversation that went on week after week after week. That went like, I'm a Christian, a believer. Anthony was a Buddhist. And so this conversation would go like this. It was a dialectical discussion. And I would say, pause, I said, that the universe, the cosmos was super personal, that there was a personality, there was a person that created it and created us, and that looks and that is there involved with it and with us. And Anthony would say, no, it's like this. It's just like an ocean of nothingness, and we're a drop that just goes into, and it will be finally, we will end up going back into the ocean of nothingness and this nirvana. And I said, Anthony, no, it's not like that. And so here it is the conversation. Now, is this the Holy Spirit, or is it just a pigeon going to shit on his head? So a composition, a figurative composition set in a landscape that illustrates and speaks the conversation that I'm depicting here. Then around the corner here, this park bench where this is directly opposed to this one. This is like, and this is, I hung out here a lot. This was like, my studio was very small, and it was all like workspace, my paints and easels and everything. So whenever the weather's nice, I'd come over here, and this is almost like my neighborhood here, my living room. And so this was the part of the park I hung out in and knew a lot of people there. Well, anyway, it was wonderful to have, anytime I left my studio to go anywhere, to go to work, to go to the academy where I was studying, to go anywhere, to the grocery store, anywhere, I would walk through this green space, to get to the subway, to get to the store, to meet my friends over here. I would walk through, it's a 14-acre park, and it's beautiful, beautiful old trees. And so I would go through there in the morning before I hit the city streets. I walk through the park. I'm coming home after being in the city, working all day, coming back home. I come back to the park, and I could sit there, and it really helped me sort of stay sane in the city. It's an intense environment, and this park was like lowercase, paradise. So my painting, and I would think about this, that this park was really, it was like paradise for me. Now, so I'm going to make a painting of the park and depict like the kind of the people, the homeless people that were there, the young people in the park. They all had these dogs. Those pit bulls were real popular there. Everybody had these dogs, and everybody was all tattooed up. And you see young couples. So I'm gonna, as I said, landscaping figures. This is what I like to paint. I like to do more with it than just simply that. So here I'm constructing this composition, and here are these figures, and here's paradise now, uppercase. The snake and the apple. Here's Adam and Eve. And they're down in the park. Here, out here, you see this long line of old folks on walkers and canes and carrying bags. This building right here is St. Luke's Lutheran Parish. They had there's a lot of people that live in the East Village and hang out and live in Tompkins Square because you can be fed there. There's a soup kitchen right here every day at noon that St. Luke's does. They're like the Hare Krishnas would have meals there, big community meals on the weekend. So you can live in the park and you can eat. And so there's a lot of characters in the park. And it was ironic to me that also St. Luke's also has a pantry. When you like bags of canned goods and staples and stuff, that they gave that out too. And it was very ironic to me the way that pictured in my mind, because it was at noon that all these, a lot of my friends, I was friends with all these people, I knew them all, they were my neighbors, but pretty much, like able-bodied folks who just would rather hang out in the park than go, worry about working for money. They didn't need to. You can hang out in the park and you can live. It's paradise. And they would go and eat at the soup kitchen, bring the food back. I ate there some myself. Or the pantry, which was 7 o'clock in the morning. And I thought, this is how ironic this is, because these fit able folks eating at noon in the soup kitchen, but these old people, pensioners and old folks, would stand, that line would go all the way down the block, going around there to get a bag of food in the morning. And, maybe when this is obviously summertime, maybe that's not too bad, but they'd be out there 7 o'clock in the morning, February, sleet coming down. And I thought, wow. So the idea here in the garden, and then those who have been cast out. Once you're cast out of the garden, once we were cast out, life then became hard, and it was a struggle. So, and just that whole image and story came to me just sitting in the park, looking at this, and I'm making this equation in my mind. And so I painted that. Now, the man sleeping, that's, there, he's still in the garden, but he's asleep. He's resting in peace. He's resting in peace, waiting for the new creation when he will be resurrected and the soul set free. The bird. So rather than just a landscape with some people in it, I'm telling the story from Genesis here as a way to, because there's a lot of time spent and a lot of labor to produce one of these paintings. So for my mind to occupy myself, to keep from getting bored with just the work of painting, which I enjoy, but it's work. And this is a means for me to stay active in my mind and to stay engaged with a painting that I might spend 3 months working at. So anyway, so Genesis, the story of Genesis depicted with Tompkins Square. Then this is looking out of the park. This building here is the same building that you see in that painting, but this is looking out of the park. This is Avenue V. And for several years, I watched this parade, this procession would go around the East Village. I asked to find out what it was, and it turned out that it was the feast of Martin of Porres. St. Martin of Porres. I thought, and I did some research to discover who he was. And I was fascinated to find, I had this theory, this idea that I had living up there in this neighborhood. And I didn't get through any polls, I never read it anywhere, but I had this thought that now New York is the international city. It's an American city, but it is also like the international city. And there are cities on the globe with more people than New York City and Mexico City, New Delhi. There's cities that there's more people, but there's a lot of people in New York City. And they're from everywhere in the world. Every race, creed, religion, ethnicity, everybody lives in New York City. And in this neighborhood, the East Village is a village, it is a neighborhood, it's a section of Manhattan that has the people who live there, the villagers who live there, have a conscious awareness that they are members of this community, this village. You know, you're walking around the neighborhood and you know who is local, you know who lives in the East Village. And it's all very cohesive and very harmonious. It's a nice place to live. If you're in the city, it's a good neighborhood. So I had this idea, and I know I'm correct, that this neighborhood is the most completely integrated and diverse neighborhood on the planet. I've never seen anybody write it down, but I know it's true because I was there. So then I was fascinated to discover that St. Martin, he's the patron saint of interracial relationships, of mixed marriage, and racial harmony. I thought, oh, that's fascinating. And that's who is paraded around this neighborhood. And not because of that idea I have, but by happenstance, it's a lay religious group who he is their patron saint. They're from Peru. St. Martin was from Lima, Peru. This was a group of Peruvian people who emigrated to New York back several generations ago, and where they lived was the East Village. They're now up in Yonkers, and over across the street here is St. Bridget's Catholic parish, and it was this group's home parish when they were first in New York in the East Village. And St. Bridget's hosts this feast day, this saint feast day. Every year is the first Saturday after Cinco de Mayo, and they come back and they parade the saint around the neighborhood. And so St. Martin, he was mixed race. His mother was a serving woman, a free woman of color, and his father was a Spanish knight. And so he was mixed race. He's always depicted he's also the patron saint of farmers and innkeepers and animals as well. But it's the patron saint of mixed relations. It's his primary designation. He's always depicted with a broom. So here's Saint. Here he is. I painted him in modern guise with his father, and as I say, patron of animals, little animals. He was friends with the animals, and he's pointing to the little couple here, the little white boy and a little dark-skinned girl who they're, in harmony. She's holding the lily of the Annunciation. It's like and he's pointing to them, saying, this is possible. This is possible, because it's not here yet today, but he's pointing towards the potential, the human potential for people to live in harmony. And then, of course, the animals that are in here that he is also that he loved. So that's this painting.
Move around in here. There are some benches back here. Again, if anybody needs a chair, let me know.
Thank you. This is now, I do a lot of portraits. In fact, a lot of the figures in these paintings are actual people. They are portraits of actual people. This is a friend of mine. She lives in North Myrtle Beach. She's an artist, a wonderful artist. I met her here in Florence, the museum, Florence County Museum. They do there's a PD Regional, which is an invitational art show that they do, and that's where I met Ashley Arrakis. There's been several times that she and I both had paintings that were included in that show. That's how I met her. And she got to be friends. Striking face. I wanted to paint her. I do commissioned portraits too. People call, I will paint, commissions, but I also will ask people who I know who I want to paint them. I wanted to paint her immediately, but I met her, a striking face. So I asked her, would she sit for me? And she said she would. And so she came up to Florence to my studio, and I made this painting. Now, many times, almost always, if I paint a portrait, there's not just, if it's just head and shoulders, but if it's a half figure or more, I have this idea that you don't have to paint a person's face to have a portrait. You can depict their hands. Like your hand is a portrait. We survive with the work and use of our hands, and the life we lead, our hands take on the character of the life that we have led, that can be a portrait. So I always will ask a sitter to choose something to hold in their hands that they feel to be emblematic of who they are. And so Ashley, she has a collection of these skulls. She puts them in her paintings. So she brought this ram's skull with her in my request to bring something to hold. So there's what that ram's skull is. Now Ashley she's her ethnic background, she is Greek and Turkish. And so she's like, I don't know, she's a beautiful young woman. She's an amazing, magical artist, like a Greek goddess, in my mind. And so I've set her on a Greek owl. And the dolphins, that's the national animal of Greece, and the gray wolf is the national animal of Turkey. So just to both to make an interesting picture and to fill the negative space around my portrait subject, but yet that speaks to the subject. So that's my portrait of Ashley Rackers. This painting, this is set in my studio in New York. I went to New York from Sullivan's Island, and I had my girlfriend down there, a long time relationship with this woman from Sullivan's Island, and then when I moved to New York and we stayed together. But it got the distance, 900 miles, as a little rocky for a relationship, but I'm going to New York, and she's an island girl. She's going to stay on Sullivan's Island, but we're going to hold this thing together. And we did for a while, but turned out that this is before cell phones. And so she would tell me, she says, now I know you're in New York and you're having a lot of fun up there. So you need to call me every evening and let me know what you're doing. So I can know what you're not doing. So I'm supposed to call every night. Now, this is back in the day, as I say, no cell phone. This is when you paid long distance telephone bills. And I'd say, baby, I know we need to talk, and I love talking with you, but these telephone bills, because I was supposed to be the one to pay the bill, because I was the one that went to New York, so it was up to me to pay the telephone bill. And it was getting pretty steep. I said, you know, that's a lot of money I'm spending on these telephone bills. So the name of this, title of this painting is Long Distance. And if you look into, it's like the pain and agony of long distance telephone bills. It's a little tongue in cheek. Down in the shadow here, like a snake, is a telephone. And so, but yeah, it was difficult, because it was difficult. It was an important relationship. It was our primary relationship. But we're set asunder by my ambition to go to New York and follow my career. But here on the wall is a little painting. This is the marriage of Eros and Psyche. So here's the ideal. Here's the reality. Here's the reality, and here's the ideal. Moving along, here's another painting. It's here in Tompkins Square. Once again, it's the same building, it's the same area, that same bench. This was my living room. Now, when the weather's good in New York City, 7 months out of the year, this jam session goes on in the city, day and night. It's there. I made a little study for this painting, like that first one up there in the city street, a small study of this scale model, and I titled that drawing "The Heartbeat of Tompkins Square," because those drums, they're going. I was around the corner when in my studio, I could hear the drummers. It's like there's a lot of people from the Caribbean, Cuba, the Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, the Afro-Cuban, Latino Caribbean beat. These drummers, percussion drummers, and instruments. Always, people would end up, if it was like nice weekends in the summer, and it'd be like those long weekends out there, and there's a jam session going on. People in the park would be dancing to the music. There's fireflies all in the park, and the fireflies would be going like this, and this music going. First couple of years when I lived in the neighborhood, I would sit over here on the park and listen to the music. But as time went by, I started meeting all my neighbors and meeting the musicians and the people. I'm a musician as well as a painter, and I ended up participating in this jam session with my guitar on my fiddle, for years, when that music was going, I'd hear the drums start up, and I'd grab an instrument, and I'd head to the park and get in on this. It was like a really wonderful, like sort of sideline thing that was going on with my life while I was living and painting in this neighborhood. Yeah, it was great. Then, speaking of music, then these next 4 paintings, I'd had, as I said, I was a musician and a painter, and I had this false notion that I had carried in my mind for some years, where I saw the music and the painting as in conflict with each other. Like sometimes I'd be concentrating on my music, I'd be playing music, but then feeling a little bit guilty because I wasn't painting, which is supposed to be, it was the way I make a living. I supplemented my income with painting, with music in New York too, busking on through. I'd go down at rush hour to the subway with my guitar and play music and have my guitar case open on the floor there, and people would throw money in it, and I'd make some extra money playing. But the painting that was my career, and that's where my energy was spent in what I was sustaining myself from. And so I'd be playing music, and I'd start feeling I said, you should be concentrating on your painting. This is too much fun. Or I'd be painting and working and laboring away, and I'm thinking, man, I like to go play some music. That's a lot more fun. And so it would bounce back and forth till all of a sudden it dawned on me, no, this is not a conflict here. This is all coming from the same creative source. It's all welling up from the same place. This is a false notion you have maintained. And there's no reason to be guilty by one or pressured by the other. It's all that I said, oh, okay, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to marry the two. I'm going to marry the two passions. And so I started making paintings of depicting the songs, the ballads and the songs that I love to play and hear. And I started this, I spent 10 years on this project and made like 20 works of art that were depicting the songs that I love. And, from that point on, the music and the art, it's all coming from the same place. Like these paintings, most of them are set at a very precise set point in the lyrics of the song. Like this is Pretty Polly, and it's the song goes. If you know the song, these songs you can pick up just where the action stops. Like this is I said, Polly, Pretty Polly, let me take you in kind. Let me sit beside you and tell you my mind. My mind is to marry and never to part. First time I saw you, it wounded my heart. Says, Polly, Pretty Polly, come and go along with me before we're married for some pleasure you see. Well, Polly, he rode over hills and mountains so deep that Polly mistrusted, then began to weep. She said, Willie, I'm afraid of your ways. The way you've been rambling, you lead me astray. And he said, Polly, Pretty Polly, your guess is about right. Because I dug on your grave the better part of last night. And she knelt down before him and pleaded for her life. Let me be your single girl if I can't be your wife. Polly, Pretty Polly, that never can be. Because your fast reputation is trouble with me. So she opened up her bosom, as white as any snow, and Dave plunged the knife, and her heart's blood did flow. Well, then they carried him to the jailhouse, and what did he say? He said, I murdered Pretty Polly, and I was trying to get away. So this is the moment when she, all of a sudden, it's like, uh-oh, I'm in trouble. And Ginger Ginger Wynn and Kay White, they're modeled. This is a mother and daughter, friends of mine. They modeled for this, and this is their horse. They had some horses up in Manning, and I went up there and visited with them. And so that's Ginger's horse that she's riding on. Then this was the first one that I started with. This is the first of that painting in that series, and this is Little Sadie. And there's a moment in this. There's a moment in the song here too. It says, I went out last night, take a little round, I saw little Sadie, and I shot her down. Went back home, I got into bed, a 44 pistol under my head. And I woke up next morning about 9:30. The hearse and the buggies were standing in line. The gents and the gamblers were standing around. They was in to take Sadie to the burying ground. Then I began to think what a deed I'd done. I grabbed my hat and away I run. And I made a good run, but a little too slow. They overtook me in Jericho. So I was standing on the corner, I was reading my bill, and up steps the sheriff of Thomasville. He said, young man, and your name Lee, murdered little Sadie in the first degree. He said, the first degree and the second degree. You got any papers? Won't you read them to me? So they took me downtown and they dressed me in black, put me on the train, and they started me back, locked me up in the Thomasville jail. I had no money to go my bail. Well, the judge and the jury, they took their stand. The judge had the papers in his right hand. Said 41 days and 41 nights, 41 years to wear the ball and stripe. So he didn't get away with it either. Then painting about the moonshiners. There's a lot of songs about the moonshiners. And so I thought I'd paint the moonshiners up in the holler. His companion there, his girlfriend, sitting there sampling some of the brew, is a friend of mine, Jessie. She's in a painting back over here as well. That's so that's I don't know. That's they are up in the holler, brewing some bright lightning. There's a lot of songs talk about that. Then this one, this is one of my favorite songs. It's not a traditional. It's not one of the Appalachian ballads. It's a contemporary song. I don't know, maybe 25 years old, maybe 30 years old. William Allen Ramsey wrote it, but Jimmy Buffett is who made it popular. It's the Ballad of Spider John. It's a sad song. It's one of my favorite songs to sing and play, but it's a song about, it's a hobo's tale. I've titled the painting The Hobo's Tale, and it's like, Spider John is my name. I'm in between freights, and I sure would be obliged if you'd share your company. It says, I'm on my way to nowhere. I've been running from my past, running from the things I used to be. It said, I know my words sound strange to you, but if you wait till the song is sung and my story's told, you might come to understand why I'm old and bent and devil-sent and running out of time. But long ago, I held a royal flush in my hand. Says, oh, I was a supermarket fool, a rolled the dice bank robber. Says, I thought I'd paid my dues. I thought I lost the blues. And it goes on and on. I lost it. And it goes on. But anyway, he says, but then one day I met Diamond Lil. She was the sweetest thing I declared that the summer breeze had ever blown my way. But Lily, she didn't know my illustrious occupation. But Spider John loved his Lily so much that he could not confess his sins, because he knew if he did, the lady'd surely take her leave. But the word got around and Lily left town, and he never saw her again, left her tossing and a turning, causing his heart to grieve. And that's all of my story. It's been these 30 years since I've been on the road looking for my precious jewel one. And if you see my Lily, won't you give her my regards? till a spider got tangled in the black web that he spun. You can tell an old spider got tangled in the black web that he spun. So I wanted to make a painting of that, and so I did. So all these paintings, it's like things that I'm interested in, people that I know, songs that I love, like philosophical thoughts, theological theories, things that engage my mind or my communications with other people, relationships, and then I set out to paint them. This is a commissioned portrait. This is a friend of mine. This is Debbie Stewart, Julian Stewart. If any of y'all know Julian and Debbie, they commissioned this portrait of Debbie. She was a poet. She was writing this book, and this is where she worked. This is her and her books and her space, and she was creating this book of portrait. This painting, it's mounted in the room, in the space in the living room, across the wall from this desktop desk. So it's almost like a mirror in the room there, across from this space. So that's a commissioned portrait. I've done a number of commissioned portraits. Some of them are not. This is a portrait. This is the newest piece in the show. I finished this just this summer. This is my great niece, my sister Anne, her granddaughter, my mom's great granddaughter, Coverly Carell. And I've just been finished like a month ago. I painted this. I had been wanting to paint a portrait of Coverly. She's a really beautiful young girl. And I've been thinking about, wondering just in what guise, just what I wanted to do with the portrait. Because as I'm talking about, I don't just paint a picture of the person. I'm going to set it some way. And what am I going to do with Coverly? Well, this was the day of my mother's funeral. And this screen in the back was in my mom's dining room. It was a screen that my father brought for her, that he brought from overseas, one of his business trips to Japan. He brought that, had it shipped in for my mom for the dining room. That's the backdrop there. Well, when Coverly, her mom and dad, Alex and Kat, came to the door on Scriven there, where we were all gathered waiting to go to St. John's for my mom's funeral, and Coverly walked in the door, and it hit me. It's like a vision. I said, this is it. This is it. She had this black velvet dress on and these little shoes and I said, it like caught in my mind. She was walking through the dining room and passing this backdrop, and I said, that's it. That's the portrait. And I got her mom and dad and says, listen, I'm not talking about now. I'm talking about after everything's over today. And we're back here, but before y'all leave to go back to Charlotte, I want to take some photographs of Coverly for the portrait I've been talking to y'all about wanting to do. And so that's what we did. The day's events, was all over, and we were all back out. The family's back at my mom's house. And I said, Coverly, I want to take a photograph of you. I want to make you a portrait. And she's up for that. And I says, okay, what we're going to do, I says, Coverly, I want you to pose for me. And just give me some pose, just relax. And I'm going to be taking your photos, your picture, just with my cell phone. And, a lot of times I think a young girl this age might have been a little bit shy about having an old, grizzly man taking pictures of her. No, not this child. It was like, all of a sudden, it's like I've got a Vogue model in front of me, and she's hitting these poses. And she's giving me these poses and expressions. She's composing herself. And I shot maybe 30 pictures. And this was the one, because that's her. She's sassy. And, it's like, and she's got a cookie in her hand. So once again, well, a child that age, what are they about? What are they about? Cookies and stuff. So that sort of, I didn't tell her to hold that cookie, but she had that cookie and I saw it. I said, good, this is it. So anyway, that's my painting of Coverly Correll. And it was cool. During the opening here, the other Thursday night, I didn't know that they were coming, but her and Alex and Kat, her mom, they drove up here from North Carolina for the opening, and I was in here talking to some people, and somebody came up to me and said, hey, I just saw this little blonde-haired girl run through here. Is she in a painting in here? I said, oh, Coverly's here. And so that was really nice.
I just want to give you a time frame, about 10 more minutes in here, and then we'll move to the back. That gives us 30 minutes.
Okay, that sounds good. Now, this is a portrait of my real close friend, Mark Taylor. This is one of my best friends, waving partners in crime, running buddies, drinking partner, fishing partner. Mark and I, we go way back to the bad old days, and there's lots of stories. I could sit here all afternoon and talk about things that this man and I got into. Now, this portrait was painted when he was dying of lung cancer a couple of years, 2 years ago. I started this. I've made some portraits of some pretty young women. There was a couple commissions that I'd had of young ladies, and I thought, what I'm going to do now? I want to paint some grizzly old men. Just sort of change pace. And so I made a painting of my brother Randy. It's not in here. I could have bought, but there was enough. I had enough paintings in here. But anyway, I got Mark. It says Mark was always real interested in my studio, and he would help me if I needed to move things and stretch big pieces of canvas and help me prime stuff. He's a house painter, commercial painter, as I am and have been at times too. Something else we had in common, both painters. But I said, I want to paint your portrait. I want a grizzly old man, because I've been painting pretty young ladies. I want to paint an old, I want an old cowboy looking guy. And so he said, yeah, he'll do that. So he'd been coughing, and his cough had not gone away, and he'd gone to have some tests made, during this time of this conversation with him, telling him I wanted him to pose for me. And so I called him up, and I says, hey, what you doing today? He says, I got to go up to Carolina's hospital, results for some tests. I said, oh, cool. Well, when you're heading back, stop at the studio, let me take some photographs of you. He said, yeah, I'll do that. And a little later that morning, he stopped. He came to the studio and came to the door and came in. I says, well, howdy, brother. How's it going? Did you get your results of your test? And he said, yeah. I said, well, what's going on? He said, well, I didn't hear what I wanted to. Stage 4 lung cancer. I said, ooh. So that photograph was taken almost like literally an hour after the man had received the death sentence. And it did turn out that was the case. I painted that, he still, while he was starting his treatments, and I finished it. But during this, I was spending a lot of time with him, because I realized that he wasn't going to be on the planet Earth much longer. And this is a man that I loved him deeply like a brother. So I was spending a lot of time with Mark, just hanging out, just talking. And I realized, hey, that portrait that I made, not enough. I could do more here. So I said, Mark, we got to do another portrait. This one's got to speak as a study. He says, yeah, you're right. We got to do more. Well, he went home for a few days in between some treatments, and I went out. He lived out in the country out near Cartersville, and I went out there, and it was one of the last times that he got up and walked around, walked out to his garden. He was an amazing gardener, organic gardening. His tomatoes that he grew were just, oh man. I ate a lot of food out of his garden for some years. He had a green thumb. Well, I sent him, this was his hard horse farm. And I sent him against that because a few years ago, for 3 seasons in a row, he hosted a big music festival out in the pasture where he had his horses. And at one of those festivals, some drunk got up and painted a crazy peace sign on the side of Mark's horse barn, which is found Mark. But anyway, and everybody saw it. So I set this. I said, "What we're going to do, Mark? We're going to do something more with this portrait." I said, "Let's set it there against that crazy peace sign that Steve painted. That way it'll set it geographically so people that know Mark and been out there know exactly where he's standing." And I says, "Now what else are we going to do?" I says, "What, something for you?" He says, "Well, I'm going to hold some tomatoes. And I'm going to hold these tomatoes." And he says, "And while you're photographing me of what I'm doing, I'm holding these tomatoes." Now, Mark, the conversations that Mark and I would have, he was my friend who, when we were sitting and just talking and just letting our minds go and just rambling conversation, the two of us always end up, we'd start saying, "Isn't it amazing?" I said, "You and I," or he would say, "You and I, the entire history of the human race, you and I have led a life of absolute, total freedom and prosperity that nobody in the history of the human race has experienced, including the potentates and the kings and the queens. No one has lived the life that you and I have lived." And he and I both took that very literally when we were growing up. We did live free. We were free, rambling men. So he says, but always that conversation would always lead to the Lord between the two of us. He was my friend that just conversation, somewhere or another, we would say where we always got to the Lord. So he was my friend. So that was something else that he and I had in common. Well, he says, "I'm going to hold these tomatoes, and while you're taking my portrait, this is what I'm doing while you're painting my portrait." He says, "I'm looking up to the Lord, and I'm giving thanks for his bounty and thanks for the life that I have lived." That's the way he wanted it to be depicted. So that's, used to call him Rocky Town. His wife's name is Rocky, and we call their property Rocky Town. That's where the music festivals were, the Rocky Town Throwdown. So this is the Honorable Mayor of Rocky Town. Portrait of Mark Taylor, giving thanks to the Lord for the abundance of life that he has experienced. And I didn't finish the painting while he was alive, but I'd go out to the hospital and he said, "You finished my painting?" I said, "No, I'm not." Because he went and put this shirt on to have his portrait done in, and that was it took me 3 months to figure out how I was going to paint that shirt. And he would say, "You painted my shirt?" And I said, "No, Mark, I'm still trying to figure it." He said, "Go ahead, get to work, get that done, because I want to see the painting, what you've done with that shirt before I take my last dying breath." And I said, "Well, I'm working on it." But it did happen. He died. And I'm still working on it. And I worked for some months on this portrait after he was gone. But the whole time I'm working on it. This shirt took me forever to paint. But he had been so intent that I paint that shirt and to make it look. He says, I want to see the texture. He says, I want to see what that shirt, I want to see if you can paint it. Well, now he's gone, and I'm looking at the shirt thinking, how am I going to paint this daggone thing? And I'm thinking, oh, well, I could fake it. I could just kind of, then I'm thinking, no. It's like the man's last dying wish was he wanted to see that shirt painted. So he got me one more time. He like laid that on me, then he passed on, and with a real chore that he like challenged me with, which actually it really was a real blessing, because while I'm sort of this loss, he provided me with this thing to focus on. So it was like one more last gift that he gave me, that transition that I had as he was transitioning. So that was, here he is again. He modeled for me. There he is in this painting. But Mark was, he was one of my good buddies. So, and then I think we moved back here.
Yeah, and I'm going to put this back a little bit so you have some room in front that people can still sit. Like I did last time, you always sat, I think people will sit this time, so.
Now, here's some more portraits. It's like the portraits, I'm just so, it's like the human figure, the human story. People have known this 3 painting is a triptych. It's a single piece that was painted with the intention to be shown together, like this, the middle piece and the dependent pieces. It's a single piece of work. And I cooked this up in my brain, something I wanted to do. These 3 guys, this is Anthony again, he's in that painting earlier. These 3 guys, friends of mine, who lived there down on the Lower East Side. All 3 of them very creative, artistic folks, buddies of mine. All 3 of them like lived on the street or in bombed out buildings with the squats there. I mean, these were free rambling men here. They lived life just out there, according to their own lives. Kurt was, and once again, I talk about things in your hand to hold as for your portrait. Now, I had this idea, I wanted to make these 3 portraits, and to get them, I was mutually friends, and to get us all together, it was coming up to my birthday that year. And you know how your friends always take you out and treat you to a birthday dinner when it's your birthday? Well, these guys would not be able to treat me to a birthday dinner. I mean, none of them had any money in their pocket. But I want this birthday dinner, I thought I would treat them. So I invited them to my birthday dinner that we met at the Life Cafe, which is a watering hole there in the East Village. It's like a known spot. I don't know if any of y'all have seen the movie or know about the Broadway play Rent. It was said it's a modern redoing of La Boheme, the opera. And it was set, the bar that the Bohemians met in Paris in La Boheme was set, in this case, in the Life Cafe. So it was a cool place. It was also the closest place to where I live, right around the corner. It's where, that's the closest watering hole, and it's a good restaurant. So I said, y'all come to my birthday dinner. I'm going to treat y'all to a birthday dinner. And so we met, and I explained to them that the occasion was more so than my birthday for me to explain to them this project that I had in mind, that I wanted to paint their portraits. and for each one to choose what they wanted to hold for their portrait. Now Anthony, who's Mexican, and his artwork had to do, he utilized a lot of the Mexican imagery, the Day of the Dead and the dancing skeletons and stuff from, the Mexican Day of the Dead type thing. So Anthony says, well, I know what I want to hold your skull. I've got this skull in my studio. It's not an actual skull, it's a plaster cast, like a student's anatomical studies skull that I've had for this just in there. And of course, that's what Anthony would hold, that's representative. Kurt drank, and he drank, and he drank, and he drank. He was a very skilled sign painter. A lot of sign painters are alcoholics, something about it. They just go hand in glove. And he finally drank himself to death, actually, some years after this. But Kurt said, well, okay, I'm gonna have to make something then, because it's got to be a wine jar, because that was his thing, his wine. So now Kurt had a girlfriend that lived in one of those buildings in East Village, and if it was raining or the weather was bad, he'd stay inside some with her. So actually he had a roof over his head sometimes. But he made that jar. He cast that jar with clay and he fired it in the gas oven in his girlfriend's apartment. And then he went down to the corner vegetable market, and he got beets and other things to use to make the glazes for the color for this thing. So he made his glazes and he fired that in that oven. So that's what Kurt made, was his wine jar to be depicted with. This was emblematic of him. Now Hassan was he was raised in a fundamentalist community, like a cult, on northwest coast up in Washington somewhere. Early on, he had this like a very, very heavy religious experience through the community that his family, where he was raised. So he's interested in religion, but along the way, he became disinterested or questioning of the fundamentalist Christian teaching that he had been that had been instilled in him, and so he went questing, and he went to the Middle East, and he went and was allowed entrance into a Sufi monastery where he studied with the Sufi monks, and they gave him the name Hassan. He became a Muslim while he was over there and became Hassan. He's interested, and by now, when I know him, he's like a student of comparative religion. He knows everything about every religion that a person could know. He's fascinated with religion, but he's pretty much, but he's Muslim. Well, he said, well, what I want to hold is your plaque. I've got this plaque that he's holding is in my studio. It's my workday touchstone. It was carved and given to me by the congregation of St. Mark's in the Bowery up in New York, Episcopal parish where I attended services when I was up there. I made some artwork for them, some large-scale, big artwork and presented as gifts to St. Mark's. And in return, they asked me, there was a Chinese woodcutter that was part of the congregation. And they asked me, hey, in return for the artwork that you have provided us with, would you like us to have a plaque with your name carved in it that you could hang in your studio? I said, I don't know. I don't know if I want that. I don't think I need that. But thank you. They said, well, is there anything else? I said, well, let me think about it. Yeah, probably, but I don't know what it is. I'll let you know if I think of it. Well, that summer, I was out in Montana with my brother and two first cousins, and we were out in the Beartooth Wilderness Range, way out, like a backpacking trek we were doing. I don't know how many miles we walked. We were up like 12,000 feet on the Rainbow Lakes Plateau. And I was one day, I had carried with me, I carried with like a pocket New Testament and Psalms that I take with me when I travel. And I was sitting out there on a rock next to this trout stream, a beautiful day. Out in the middle, I mean out in the wilderness, man, we were way out there. And I'm reading in the Psalms. And I was reading the 90th Psalm. And I came to the 17th verse of the 90th Psalm. And it says, may the beauty of the Lord establish the work of our hands, yea, may his truth establish the work of our hands. I said, that's it. That's it. That's what I want. I want a plaque that says that. So when I got back to New York, I talked to Michael Grelier, the priest. I said, I know what I want. I want that verse from the 17th verse of the 90th Psalm, and I want the word beauty that's in that verse carved into an oval plaque. I want it painted red because the guy who's carving is Chinese. I want it Chinese red. I want the Christian cross carved in it, and in the Hebraic characters, I want translated beauty from out of that psalm carved in it, and then the 90th Psalm, 17th verse. That's what I want. And he came back to me a couple of days later and said, this is interesting. I've translated your verse for you. And your testament, your psalm, it translated as beauty. That also translates as truth. I said, oh, that's interesting. So it's like, may the truth of the Lord establish the work of our hands. Yea, establish the work of our hands. So I had that, and it hangs in my studio above my workspace now for many, many years. It's like touchstone. When I start going there to go to work in the morning, that's there. So Hassan, he said, well, I want to hold your plaque. And those were the objects that these three friends of mine chose. This snake here, it's not a snake, it's a walking stick. People say, ooh, what's the snake in there all about? Well, it's just because it's in my studio. It was leaning against the wall, and what it is a walking stick. I was down in Savannah for a year, artist in residency down there in the late 80s, and there was a gallery, New Southern Paintings had me down there as a residency program they had. And there was another artist from Savannah, he's a wood carver, did beautiful sculptures, of figures, but he also carved these walking sticks that he would show, like bread and butter money. Like, to buy one of his big sculptures, you'd have to have deep pockets. But he had these walking sticks that, and I bought one. I figured, I'm a young, spry fellow now, but I'm gonna get this walking stick because one of these days I'll be an old man and I'll be ready. Then this is probably time for this last one here. I was in Manhattan, in the East Village, for 20 years. And then I lost my apartment. I got evicted, and I went to Brooklyn. I've been going to a lot of, in fact, almost all my friends were already over in Brooklyn because Manhattan had gotten to be so expensive that young people, young artists, no longer could live workspace there. I had been fortunate earlier on to get a place in the East Village. So I lived in, but most of my social time was spent over, and if we weren't going out bar hopping or going to art shows or whatever, but times when my friends was over in Brooklyn. And I'd already for a couple of years had my motorcycles over there. My buddies had built vintage bikes and repair bikes and road bikes. And I already had a bike shop in Brooklyn. When I lost my apartment, I moved over there, moved into what had been my bike shop. I moved those tools over in the corner and brought my easel and the paint stuff in. Is in this warehouse. Now I said I'd been a sign painter. Now my friend Ray, when I first was working in that sign shop with Anthony, Ray was working in there as a sign painter too. So I met him immediately after I'd just been in this city for a couple of months, and we stayed close friends through all those years. He was an amazing artist. He was a powerful painter, and he was the one artist who I knew who was kind of doing what I was doing, figurative paintings, realistic sort of big scale story paintings depicting the human figure, set into some narrative format. We worked together on a lot of mural jobs that he and I did together, sign jobs that we did together. The two of us did all that signage on the wall, exterior wall of the warehouse. That was our work. We put all that up. There was one time Ray and I went down together to Palm Beach and painted a mural at Rod Stewart's house. So he was like, as well as a real close friend of mine, he was also like an important professional associate of mine. We showed in galleries together. There was a lot of common ground that he and I shared. We both like to go bar hopping and drinking, and he was a good friend of mine. Now, this motorcycle, and then my motorcycle is that same bike as that. We built those two bikes together in his studio. That's when I was still in Manhattan and over there working on the bikes in Brooklyn. Well, I moved into this warehouse, and these are friends of mine. Jessie, she's in the moonshine painting. She lived in the warehouse. Mikey, his tattoo artist, he did all my tattoo work. He lived in the warehouse. Ray's studio and my studio was in the warehouse. We all lived in this building. It was like a real creative hive of activity. There was like a coffee roaster had his place in there. There were two woodworking shops, the motorcycle repair shop, the art studios. There was down at the far end of the building, there was an all-girl trapeze artist. They had their space in there. They would do like a trapeze, all-girls trapeze circus. Down at that end of the warehouse, they would have performances down there. So a group of all type buddies, and Giselle, who's a good friend of ours. Well, Ray, I came back to Florence in 2011. I still went back and forth to New York a good bit. When I was first back here in Florida, I was still traveling back and forth a lot because my connections were in New York. I hadn't yet connected back and found so much work here in this area, so I was still counting on my connections in here, going back and forth still a lot. Well, by now I'm kind of based in Florence, and it's been about 5 years since I've been up there. But Ray, he had several motorcycles. Not this one, but he was on another tribe, and he was killed. A truck took him out in 2014. So this painting, like it's homage to an era, and it's an homage to Ray and the friendship I had with Ray, and the work we did together, the bikes that we built together, the bikes we rode together. This coming down, that was his graffiti tag, as well as a classical painter and a commercial artist. He was also like an outlaw graffiti guy, and he would paint these. It was all over the city. It was this skull, Te Amo baby. Y'all remember Kojak? the show Kojak? Remember how Kojak would say, "Who loves you, baby?" Well, Ray was one of these larger-than-life figures too. For years he'd been known as the mayor of Williamsburg. By now, later on, he was the Prince of Brooklyn, and he was known far and wide as the Prince of Brooklyn. He was a powerful individual, a lot of charisma. Well, and this was all over. This was his thing. It was like Kojak saying, "Who loves you, baby?" It was Ray, "Te amo." "Te amo, baby. I love you, baby." And if you were anywhere near in a room and Ray's coming into the room and he sees you, either you better turn around and go somewhere else if you don't want this, because he's going to come at you, he's going to grab you in a bear hug, and whether you male or female, he's going to plant a big sloppy kiss right on your mouth. Te amo, baby. He was something. But anyway, and he would always say when he's coming for you, he said, "I'm coming in hot." Yeah. And so here it is. So he's coming in hot. Yeah, that was it. Now I went up there for his funeral. Ray had his bikes. He had this hot rod truck, a 1955 Ford hot rod truck, and it was a beast. There was nobody else but me would drive the thing, because you couldn't drive it unless you knew that truck well, because the gear shift on the floor, it wouldn't go, and you had to know where the gears were. It wouldn't just slide into gear. You had to have the combination to get it into the gear. The clutch was so stiff, you had to almost stand up to get it to the floor. The steering wheel went like this, but it sounded good. It had like glass pack mufflers on it, and it was fast. It had a built engine in it, and that thing would move. But anyway, no one else drove the thing, but I would drive it, and I would ride his bike too, and he'd ride mine. We swap off. But anyway, his funeral, I went up there. I got a telephone call. I was at my mom's house and the phone rang, and I saw it was a New York number. And the news, Ray had been taken out by a car that afternoon, and he'd gone to the hospital, and they tried to patch him up, but he was gone. So I went up for the funeral, and he and I, there was a whole area around there of custom hot rod and bike builders, fabricators. Very creative in that area too. And we were friends with all these guys. And so a bunch of us met in a shop, and we fabricated an urn for his ashes, and everybody put their bit on it. Like I lettered he was El Rey, the king, on to the urn. Other people, like traced, engraved different things on it. We made this for his ashes. We put a petcock, like your petcock for your motorcycle tank, where your gas line is, in the bottom of his urn. A little tongue-in-cheek, but we figured that he'd have got a kick out of it, because Ray at one point had read Keith Richards' autobiography, and all of a sudden Ray's like, he's gonna outdo Keith Richards. He's channeling Keith Richards. And it's like, nobody but this man would have read Keith Richards' autobiography and figured that he was like competition or equal. But anyway, so there's like that urban myth about when Keith Richards' dad died and Keith snorted some of the ashes, his dad's ashes. I don't think it's true, but anyway, it's one of those urban myths. So anyway, the thing being, those who knew and know Ray and been around him would understand what that petcock underneath the urn of ashes for. Because when we got to the bar where the party was, if you wanted a little toot of Ray, you could open up the petcock and get you some ashes. Of course, nobody did, but it was, you know, it was just fun. It was for fun. Anyway, so I got up there for the funeral, and I mean, there was no question who was going to drive the truck, pickup truck with Ray's ashes in the back, and his daughter and mother riding in the cab, and I'm driving the pickup truck for the parade. We took over the streets of Brooklyn. The police allowed it. This is going to be Ray's last ride, and I'm driving the pickup truck. And right behind the pickup truck is this bike with Mike riding Ray's bottle behind, and then the procession of, I don't know, 500 motorcycles, hot rods, trucks, people on crazy looking bicycles. It was this parade that went for blocks. And what we were doing, we were going around and we were stopping at each of the watering holes where Ray drank his last ride, and we would get to this bar, and they would come out with flowers, piling them up onto the hood of the truck. Musicians were coming out and playing. We'd stop at this bar, they put the flowers up, they'd come out and they'd play music. You know, somebody take another little drink and go on to the next one. Wound all around Williamsburg and Greenpoint, stopping at all the Ray's watering holes. And we ended up at Union Pool, which was a bar that Ray and his wife had built out and established. And when we got there, that was going to be, the ashes are going to go and be put on the bar, and that was it, and there's going to be a blowout. There's like hot rods and motorcycles out in the street doing burnouts. You know, a mariachi band came out and surrounded the truck, playing Guantanamo Rail. How do you say that? It's, it was wild. But there got to be so many flowers up on the hood of that truck that I couldn't see anymore. It was like piled up above the windshield. So you got a blind man driving the truck in front of this parade, and little Alex, one of my friends, standing on the running board, directed me. He says, all right, take this turn, take a turn. I said, oh, slow down, some kid on a bicycle just got in front of you, wanting to lead the parade. So it was quite and all this, it's on YouTube, it's online. This parade it was something. Anyway, this is my painting. This is homage to that era. That warehouse is now bulldozed down, and it's a high-rise, fancy glass, 4-star hotel put in its place. But that was an era that's gone, but it was quite a place and time. So that's my painting to memorialize that and my friend Ray.
It's just about 3 o'clock. Typically this wasn't thing that I'm going to stay open in case anybody wants to talk to Robert directly, or if you have any other questions or you want to see some of the other paintings, but that'll conclude this part of the talk. But don't feel rushed.
Yeah, so very good.
And make sure to check out the photos of Bobby from 1974 to 2023 as well. Or you go backwards, like